Dr. Elena Vasquez pressed her palm against the reinforced titanium glass barrier, watching the creature huddle in the far corner of its containment cell. The being was no larger than a house cat, its translucent blue skin pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that seemed to shift with its emotional state. Currently, those patterns flickered a deep crimson, fear according to the xenobiological readouts. Day 14 of observation, she spoke into her recorder. Subject continues to exhibit signs of distress despite optimal environmental conditions. Nutritional intake remains minimal. Behind her, Director Hawthorne cleared his throat. Dr. Vasquez, the Galactic Science Council is growing impatient. They want results, not emotional attachment to a test subject. Elena didn't turn around. Through the barrier, she could see the creature's large, opalescent eyes tracking her movement. There was intelligence there, an awareness that chilled her to the bone. This wasn't just some exotic animal they'd pulled from a distant moon. This was a sentient being, and they were keeping it prisoner. The preliminary scans suggest incredible psychic potential, Hawthorne continued, his voice taking on that familiar bureaucratic tone. If we can understand how its neural pathways function, we could revolutionize interstellar communication. Think of the military applications alone. Elena's jaw tightened. Military applications. Always came back to that, didn't it? The creature, she'd started thinking of it as Azure in her private notes, suddenly moved. It approached the barrier slowly, its movements graceful despite the obvious weakness from days of refusing food. When it reached the wall, it placed what could only be described as a hand against the glass, directly opposite Elena's palm. The moment of contact sent a jolt through Elena's mind. Not painful, but startling, like suddenly hearing a whisper, in a language she almost understood. Images flashed through her consciousness, a world of crystal forests and singing winds, others of its kind moving in harmonious groups, then darkness, cold metal, and overwhelming loneliness. My God, Elena breathed, stumbling backward. It's trying to communicate. Hawthorne's eyes lit up with avarice. Excellent. Begin the neural interface protocols immediately. We need to map those pathways while the connection is active. No. The word left Elena's mouth before she could stop it. Excuse me? Elena turned to face the director, her voice gaining strength. I said no. This being is telepathic, possibly empathic. It's been trying to tell us something for days, and all we've done is poke and prod and analyze. She gestured toward the cell. Look at it, Hawthorne. Really look. That's not an animal. That's a person. The director's face darkened. Dr. Vasquez, you're allowing emotion to cloud your scientific judgment. This specimen represents the greatest xenobiological discovery in human history. We cannot afford to anthropomorphize it. But Elena was already moving toward the cell's control panel. Her fingers flew over the holographic interface, inputting her override codes. The greatest discovery in human history, she repeated, and our first instinct is to weaponize it. Alarms began blaring as the containment field powered down. Security personnel rushed into the lab, but Elena had already opened the cell door. Azure emerged hesitantly, its bioluminescent patterns shifting to a cautious yellow-green. Step away. From the specimen, Dr. Vasquez! Hawthorne shouted over the alarms. Security, tranquilize both the subject and the doctor if necessary. Elena knelt down, extending her hand toward Azure. The being approached slowly, then pressed its palm against hers again. This time, the mental connection was stronger, clearer. She felt its gratitude, its desperate hope, and something else, a kind of judgment. Azure was evaluating her, measuring her character against some internal standard. The images came faster now. Elena's own memories reflected back at her, but seen through Azure's perspective. Her years of study, her genuine love for discovery, her horror at the military applications of her research. Then something remarkable happened. She felt Azure's decision, its choice, reverberating through their connection. When the security team raised their tranquilizer weapons, Azure moved, not away from Elena, but closer, wrapping its arms around her in what could only be described as a protective embrace. A wave of psychic energy pulsed outward from the small being, and every weapon in the room simply stopped functioning. Not broken, not destroyed, just rendered inert, as if their fundamental nature had been temporarily forgotten. "Impossible," Hawthorne whispered. Elena felt Azure's communication flowing through her mind, and somehow she found herself able to translate. "It says," she began, her voice carrying an odd harmonic quality, "that it was brought here against its will, that its people are peaceful, but they are not defenseless. It says that humanity stands at a crossroads." The being's grip tightened around her, and more images flooded Elena's consciousness. She saw humanity's future branching into two distinct paths. One where they learned compassion and cooperation from species like Azure's, becoming part of a greater galactic community. Another where they continued down their current path of exploitation and militarization, ultimately destroying themselves and being quarantined by the rest of the civilized galaxy. "It's choosing me," Elena said, wonder filling her voice. "Not as a researcher or a scientist, but as a guardian, a bridge between our species." She looked up at Hawthorne, who stood frozen in shock. "This isn't about what we can take from them. It's about what we can learn to become." Azure's patterns shifted to a brilliant gold, and Elena felt a profound sense of purpose settling over her. The being had seen something in her, some quality that made her worthy of trust. Not human ambition or curiosity, but something deeper, the capacity for empathy, for protection, for putting another's welfare above her own advancement. As she stood, Azure still clinging to her, Elena realized that this moment would define not just her future, but humanity's place in the cosmos. They had been given a choice, embodied in one small, terrified being who had somehow found the courage to trust. The specimen was meant for observation, but it had chosen Elena Vasquez as its guardian. Now she would have to prove worthy of that choice, and show her species what it truly meant to be human.